Hey, what's up, Micro Church? This week we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 9, verses 14 through 29. And what we're going to see is this story of Jesus healing this young boy with an unclean spirit. And so, what had just happened in the Gospel of Mark is Jesus and his three disciples, Peter, James, and John, right, went up the mountain. They saw Jesus transfigured, they saw Jesus in his full glory, full power, full majesty, and everything. And then they're coming back down the mountain, and what they come to was sometimes what we experience in life, right? They're on this mountaintop high. They have this spiritual high. They see God doing amazing things, and they come back, and it's like evil is just sitting there waiting for them, right? It's like it's waiting at their door as they come back, and so they're immediately greeted with this chaos and evil and all of this other stuff that is taking place. And here's the reality, right? That's what evil does, right? Evil's sole purpose in life is to steal, to kill, and destroy. And what we're going to see in this narrative is a physical picture of this very thing taking place. And so check it out. Mark chapter 9, starting in verse 14, it says, "When they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them, and scribes arguing with them. And immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him. And they asked him, 'What are you arguing about with them?' And someone from the crowd answered him, 'Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has this spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and he grinds his teeth, and it becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able to do so.'" Right? And so this narrative, right, this story is a physical picture of what evil does in our lives, right? Jesus approaches his disciples and he asks them this question. He asks, "What are you arguing about with them?" And in this moment, right, this man steps forward and says, "I brought my son to you. He's got this unclean spirit. He seizes and he foams at the mouth. He becomes rigid, and all of these things take place." And so when we look at this description and we continue to read on, what we notice and what we see is evil, right? This ultimate evil and what evil does in our lives, right? Evil's ultimate goal is to destroy. In fact, later on in this encounter, the Father tells us and tells Jesus that this spirit will often cast the young boy into the water, trying to drown it, or cast the young boy into a fire, trying to kill him, right? Trying to destroy him. And so, in this picture of evil and what it does, what we see is that evil steals this young boy's ability to talk. It makes him mute. It steals his ability to communicate with those around him. It attempts to kill his spirit by sending him into these awful attacks, right? These attacks on his body and on his mind. And then it attempts to destroy him by casting him into water and to fire. And so with this in mind, there are two things that we need to pay attention to in the physical representation of evil in our own lives. The first is this, right? We must be aware of how destructive evil truly is in our lives. Sin and evil, right, never seek out our good. We need to understand that. Right? They don't hope, like evil and sin doesn't hope for the best in our lives. It doesn't edify us or build us up in any way. And as I've already said, evil's sole purpose is to steal, to kill, and ultimately is to destroy. That's all it seeks out to accomplish. And I think that we're all probably aware of this reality, but the second thing that we need to pay attention to is this. We don't always recognize evil as evil. Right? We like to call out what we see as evil, but sometimes evil appears to be appealing and attractive in our own lives. I think we can all agree that things like racism and hate and terrorism and all these things, right, are evil. I think we can agree with these things. But when we talk about lusting after someone, right, or gossiping with someone about someone, right, or we look at things like looking at pornography or lying at work or cheating on a test or becoming lackadaisical and overeating or whatever evil we want to list, right? There are things that we will call evil. Murder is evil, but then we kind of want to just scrape by and say, well, that's not really that evil. Okay? And so here's the deal. Evil is evil, and evil always seeks out to steal, to kill, and destroy. When we look at these things like pride or adultery or stealing or cheating or lying or whatever, all of these things seek out to destroy marriages. They seek out to destroy relationships. They seek out to destroy our faith, and they rob us of our humanity, because that's what evil does, right? Evil robs us of our humanity. And so Mark is giving us this physical representation, this physical picture of the destructiveness of evil in our lives. But he's also showing us that we're also completely powerless against evil, right? Meaning that our only hope is found in Jesus Christ, right? He is our only hope. He is our only hope for rescue. He's our only hope for redemption. He is our only hope for peace and restoration and reconciliation. And so what this means is that there's nothing that you and I can do. We can't be good enough. We can't be spiritual enough. We can't be strong enough to defeat the evil in this world or the evil in our own lives, right? This is important for us to understand, because what this does and what this means is that the playing field is leveled for all of us, right? There isn't anyone on the face of this earth that is more capable of defeating evil than anyone else, right? There isn't any one person who is more capable of producing more evil either, right? We've all fallen short of the glory of God, and we're all on the same page, right? There aren't some of us that have spiritual superpowers and others that don't, right? And we know this because the Father told Jesus, I brought my son to your disciples, but they couldn't help him, right? If we go on to read, looking at verse 19, it says, Jesus answered them and said, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me. And they brought the boy to him. And when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood, and has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible for the one who believes. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, but help my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand, lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast it out? And he said to them, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. Right? Jesus, what we see here is he rebuked the disciples. Right? His rebuke is actually one of love and of grace. Right? I would have the tendency in this moment to look at the disciples and say, man, you fools. If you haven't gotten it by now, there's no hope that you ever will. Right? I've shown you everything about who I am. I've shown you everything about what to do, and you still don't understand, and you still don't believe. I'm done. Right? That would have been my response. But Jesus, he doesn't respond like this. He rebukes the disciples, and he asks for the boy to be brought to him. Right? He continues to give them a picture of his power and his glory and his grace. He continues to show them who he is. And when the boy is brought to him, right, the unclean spirit begins to attack. The boy starts having a seizure and falls to the ground and begins to foam at the mouth. And then Jesus asks the father how long it's been happening, and the father says it's been happening since he was a little kid. Right? And he says, if you can do anything, have compassion on us. And it's one of those moments that we hear about, or whatever, and many sermons have been taught on this passage right here. And he says, if I can, right? All things are possible for those who believe. And immediately the father cries out, I believe, but help my unbelief. Right? We all have things in our life that we believe, but maybe we're lacking or whatever. And so Jesus, he finishes his response, and he says, all things are possible for those who believe. Right? See, our problem is not that God is not able or not willing to do extraordinary things in our life. Right? The problem often lies in our own hearts, in our own faith. right? If we fail to trust in him, if we take matters into our own hands and we do things as we best see fit, we forget that God is with us and that he is for us and that he is good. We forget about his love, we forget about his grace, and we forget about his mercy in our lives. We neglect his will and his ways for our own. Which then the Father says, I believe, but help my unbelief, right? What an incredibly humble and honest confession to make. Right? This man looks at Jesus and he says, I believe that you can, but help me where I don't. Help me to believe more, help me to believe deeper, help me to trust in you and in your love. Right? This confession is a confession of real faith. And so what we need to know is Jesus uses our imperfect faith to accomplish his perfect work. Right? That's the bottom line. Jesus uses our imperfect faith to accomplish his perfect work. And what an incredibly freeing realization that is. What an incredibly freeing confession to make. Father, I believe, but help me where I don't.